Are you trying to get the Path of Burning Steps, Star Eater Scales, or Boots of the Assembler? If you're trying to get the brand new exotic boots, or maybe any exotic that you're still missing, this video will show you the best loadout for each legendary lost sector. Each loadout will get you the easiest clears for each lost sector, even if you're under level. These loadouts are to get you guaranteed completions quickly enough that you could still run more than one lost sector to get your drop. In the Perdition legendary lost sector, all arc damage you deal is increased. There's 2 overload champions and 2 barrier champions we need to take out for the platinum rewards. The best loadout I found is a kinetic auto rifle or scout rifle with anti-barrier rounds. Then in your energy slot, run the Ikelos SMG or 7 Seraph SMG for the increased arc damage, as well as for the overload champions. For champion and boss DPS, I like to use the Anarchy exotic grenade launcher, since the arc damage is increased, and then it has plenty of ammo for easily taking out both champions and the boss at the end. If you're running a Titan, you should use Middle Tree Striker for one-shotting the boss, or Top Tree Sentinel for Ward of Dawn bubble so your Anarchy will do more damage, and you'll have Void abilities to take out the 2 Void shields in this lost sector. For Warlocks, either Top Tree Nova Bomb or Middle Tree Stormcaller, and then for Hunters, if you run Celestial Nighthawk with Bottom Tree Golden Gun, you can one-shot the boss if you hit the very small crit in the middle of its body. In the Quarry legendary lost sector, all Void damage you deal is increased, and there's 2 barrier champions and 2 unstoppable champions you need to kill. The best loadout I found is Dead Man's Tale for anti-barrier rounds, the Truth Teller for unstoppable rounds, and then either Threaded Needle or Code Duello for boss and champion DPS. If you're lower power level, you should use a Threaded Needle because you'll have plenty of ammo for safely taking out the champions and the boss from distance. If your power level isn't really an issue, you can use Code Duello to break the solar shield on the boss with one shot, and then swap between Truth Teller and Code Duello to take out the boss. On Titan, I liked using Middle Tree Sentinel for the neutral game. Each ability will reduce the cooldown of the next ability, so you can chain together your grenade and your melee, with some strong burst AoE damage on the enemies leading up to the boss. On Warlock, run Top Tree Nova Bomb for supercharged grenades, and on Hunter, use Top Tree Night Stalker for invis. In the Scavenger's Den legendary lost sector, your solar damage is increased, and then there's 3 overload champions and 2 barrier champions you need to kill before pulling the chest. The best loadout I found is a kinetic hand cannon for the overload champions, and then Ariana's Vow for increased solar damage on champions and barrier rounds on the barrier champion. You can also use it for boss DPS and champion DPS, but your heavy DPS option is going to be Code Duello, the solar rocket launcher in your heavy slot. On Titan, my go-to is Middle Tree Striker for boss DPS, especially with the Curious of the Falling Star for more damage. On Warlock, Middle Tree Dawnblade for Well of Radiance, and then on Hunter, Bottom Tree Gunslinger with Celestial Nighthawk if you have it for the extra boss DPS. In the Excavation Site 12 legendary lost sector, there's 3 unstoppable champions and 1 barrier champion. All of your solar damage is increased, so for our loadout, we're going to use a kinetic auto rifle or scout rifle for anti-barrier rounds. And then in our energy slot, we're going to use the Empty Vessel solar grenade launcher for unstoppable rounds. And then for boss and champion DPS, we're going to use Xenophage. Honestly, it doesn't really matter what subclass you use, you're going to be clearing the lost sector so quickly that you're probably not going to get your super, so you should probably just use an arc subclass so then you can use a grenade or your melee ability to break the arc shield on the final boss. In the Exodus Garden legendary lost sector, all of your void damage is increased, and there's 2 barrier champions and 2 overload champions for platinum rewards. The best loadout I found is a kinetic auto rifle or scout rifle for anti-barrier rounds, and then a void hand cannon for overload rounds like the bottom dollar from Gambit or the palindrome from Nightfall Ordeals. And then for boss and champion DPS, I like to use the Truth exotic rocket launcher. It's got some really high burst damage for taking out a champion, and you only need a couple rockets to take out the final boss at the end. If you're running Titan, you should use Top Tree Sentinel for the Ward of Dawn bubble for extra damage to the boss at the end. If you're on Warlock, you should use Top Tree Voidwalker to one-shot the boss with your Nova Bomb. And if you're on Hunter, you should use Bottom Tree Gunslinger with Celestial Nighthawk if you have it for the increased boss DPS. In the Veles Labyrinth legendary lost sector, all of your arc damage is increased, and you'll need to kill 1 unstoppable champion and 2 barrier champions. The best loadout I found is a kinetic auto rifle or scout rifle for anti-barrier rounds. And then in your energy slot, the Scavenger Salvo arc grenade launcher for unstoppable rounds, and for some boss and champion DPS. For your main DPS option though, you're going to use the arc grenade launcher Anarchy, since it does a ton of damage and you can swap back to the Scavenger Salvo to get some tick damage from Anarchy, and then direct damage from Scavenger Salvo for boss and champion DPS. Regardless of what class you're running, I think you should use a solar subclass to easily break the solar shield at the end of the Lost Sector. You're probably going to finish the Lost Sector before you get your super, so it really comes down to what subclass has the best neutral game. If you're using an arc subclass, you'll be able to kill the red bar enemies a little bit faster up to the boss, but then you'll have a little bit of trouble breaking the solar shield right before the boss. With the solar subclass, you'll have both your grenade ability and your melee ability to break the solar shield on the wizard, so then you can quickly kill it with the Scavenger Salvo and Anarchy combo. For boss DPS, since you're probably not going to have your super, you're just going to drop a couple Anarchy shots on the boss, and then just use direct damage from Scavenger Salvo to finish the boss. In the empty tank legendary Lost Sector, all of your solar damage is increased, and you need to kill 2 overload champions and 2 barrier champions for platinum rewards. The best loadout I found is a kinetic auto rifle or scout rifle for anti-barrier rounds. And then for the overload champions, I kinda get around them by using empty vessel with the breach and clear mod on my class item. It'll buff my damage for a few seconds, so I hit the overload champion with empty vessel, swap to xenophage in my heavy slot, and just quickly kill the overload champion without really dealing with its mechanic. If you're really low power level though, you should use a kinetic hand cannon for overload rounds, Ariana's Vow for anti-barrier rounds and some champion DPS, and then Code Duello the solar rocket launcher for boss and champion DPS. If you're on Titan, you should use Middle Tree Striker for the boss DPS. If you're on Warlock, you should use Middle Tree Dawnblade for the Well of Radiance super to buff your damage. And then if you're on Hunter, you should use Bottom Tree Golden Gun with Celestial Nighthawk if you have it for the extra boss DPS. In the K1 Logistics Legendary Lost Sector, all of your void damage is increased, and you need to kill 3 barrier champions and 2 overload champions for platinum rewards. The best loadout I found is a kinetic hand cannon for the overload rounds, a solar scout rifle for anti-barrier rounds and solar shields, and then for boss and champion DPS, the Truth exotic rocket launcher. If you're on Titan, you should use Top Tree Sentinel for the extra damage Ward of Dawn gives you. If you're on Warlock, you should use Bottom Tree Voidwalker for one-shotting the boss with your Nova Bomb. And if you're on Hunter, you should use Top Tree Night Stalker for debuffing the boss. In the K1 Communion Legendary Lost Sector, all of your solar damage is increased, and you have 2 barrier champions and 2 overload champions you need for platinum. The best loadout I found is a kinetic hand cannon for the overload rounds, Ariana's Vow for anti-barrier rounds and champion DPS, and then in your heavy slot, you should use the solar rocket launcher Code Duello for boss and champion DPS. If you're running Titan, you should use Top Tree Sentinel to buff your weapon damage. If you're running a Warlock, you should use Middle Tree Dawnblade to buff your damage. And if you're a Hunter, you should use Bottom Tree Golden Gun with Celestial Nighthawk if you have it for the extra boss DPS. In the K1 Crew Quarters Legendary Lost Sector, all of your arc damage is increased, and you need to kill 2 overload champions and 2 barrier champions for platinum rewards. The best loadout I found is a kinetic auto rifle or scout rifle for anti-barrier rounds. But the weapon you're going to use the most is the Risk Runner Exotic Arc SMG for overload rounds, for some extra arc resistance, and pretty much non-stop ad clear because of its exotic perk. For boss DPS, you could use an arc rocket launcher, but most of your damage is going to come from your super. If you're on Titan, you should use Middle Tree Striker for boss DPS. If you're on a Warlock, you should use Middle Tree Stormcaller. And if you're on Hunter, you should use Bottom Tree Golden Gun with Celestial Nighthawk if you have it. In the K1 Revelation Legendary Lost Sector, all of your void damage is increased, and you have to kill 3 unstoppable champions and 3 barrier champions for platinum rewards. The best loadout I found is a kinetic auto rifle or scout rifle for anti-barrier rounds, and Truth Teller the void grenade launcher for unstoppable rounds and DPS. And then surprisingly, I found the best boss and champion DPS to actually be the Leviathan's Breath exotic bow. With full bow ammo mods on your armor, you kinda just never run out of ammo. As long as you stun an unstoppable ogre with your Truth Teller first, every single champion in this lost sector can be killed by only 2 Leviathan Breath shots. The best part is that you can stun lock the final boss with fully charged Leviathan's Breath shots and take no damage from the boss. If you're on Titan, you should use Top Tree Sentinel for the extra weapon damage. If you're on Warlock, you should use Bottom Tree Voidwalker for the boss DPS. And if you're on Hunter, you should use Top Tree Night Stalker for invis and debuffing the boss with your super. In the Concealed Void Legendary Lost Sector, all of your solar damage is increased, and you need to kill 3 Overload champions and 2 Barrier champions for Platinum. The best loadout I found is a kinetic hand cannon for the overload rounds. For the barrier champion, I can kill it before it pops its barrier with Xenophage, so in my energy slot I'll just use the empty vessel grenade launcher with the breach and clear class item mod to buff my damage against the champions and the final boss. If you're running Titan, you should use Middle Tree Striker for boss DPS. If you're running Warlock, you should use Middle Tree Dawnblade for the extra weapon damage. And if you're running Hunter, you should use Bottom Tree Golden Gun with Celestial Nighthawk if you have it for the extra boss DPS. In the Bunker E15 Legendary Lost Sector, all of your void damage is increased, and you need to kill 1 barrier champion and then at least 2 overload champions for platinum rewards. I say at least 2 overload champions because you can get more that'll spawn in the boss room if you take too long to kill the boss. The best loadout I found is a kinetic hand cannon for the overload champions, a void grenade launcher for champion DPS and ad clear, like the Truth Teller void grenade launcher. And then for boss and champion DPS, I like to use the Truth exotic rocket launcher because you can kill the barrier champion with 2 rockets before it pops its barrier. And then you still have some pretty good burst DPS for the boss. If you're on Titan, you should use Top Tree Sentinel for the weapon buff. If you're on Warlock, you should use Bottom Tree Voidwalker for the boss DPS. And then if you're on Hunter, you should use Top Tree Night Stalker for invis, as well as debuffing the boss with your super. And there you go. These are the best loadouts I found for all of the legendary lost sectors for quick and easy clears. If this video helped you out, hit the like button and subscribe to the channel if you want to get recommended more content. If you want to know the full Season of the Splicer lost sector rotation, linked below I have a post that shows the entire schedule for the season, so if you need the new exotic boots, you'll know exactly what days you can farm for them. Thanks for watching.
This whole world twice, if I could be a paradise.